My name is Linda Hayes. I'm 32 years old. And this is the story of how I paid for everything, for 10 years straight, and still found out they were trying to sell the house I bought, behind my back. I used to believe that love meant sacrifice. That family meant loyalty. And if you gave enough of yourself, enough money, enough time, enough heart, they'd see your worth. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. It started with a whisper. A single sentence that cracked the foundation of everything I thought I knew. I had just come home from work early that day. Something told me not to stay late. I was exhausted, my heels in one hand, the folder of quarterly reports still clutched in the other, when I passed the hallway and heard my father say, "Linda is a burden. No one wants to marry someone like her." I stopped cold. I don't even think he knew I was home. The TV murmured from the living room. My mother was laughing softly. And my younger sister, Ava, the golden one, sat next to them with her legs tucked beneath her like a child. Like the same child I'd covered tuition for. Paid off her student debt. Bought her first car. All while working full-time as a CFO for a regional energy firm in Texas. I paid every bill. The mortgage, utilities, medical expenses, home repairs, every single one came through me. When my dad had a stroke 5 years ago, I didn't hesitate. I moved into the cold, musty basement of the family home and gave up a future I'd built brick by brick. A promotion, a relationship, a home of my own. All gone in the blink of a phone call. Because family needed me. And that's what you do, right? When they need you, you show up. I became the silent workhorse. Morning nurse, evening chauffeur, weekend accountant, full-time breadwinner. I handled my dad's physical therapy schedule, tracked medications, stocked the fridge, paid off Ava's graduate school in California, and still managed to keep my firm's financials airtight. And in return? I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't even a sister. I was a burden. That word echoed in my chest as I stood barefoot in the hallway. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe. I just listened, numb, as Ava giggled and said, "She means well. She's just intense." My mother responded, "She'll be fine. Linda always bounces back. She just needs someone to tell her what to do. She's not really the independent type, you know?" They had no idea I was hearing every word. And that was the moment something inside me cracked, not like a scream, not even like a sob. But like a glass slowly spidering from the center. Quiet. Invisible. Irreversible. Later that night, Ava knocked on my basement door. I didn't answer. She slid an envelope under it. "Can you co-sign this loan?" she called out cheerily. "It's just for the wedding. We're short by a bit." I picked it up. My name was already there. Signed. Poorly forged, but close enough that a distracted bank clerk might let it slide. I opened the other documents in the envelope. Pages and pages of paperwork with my name attached. Bank records. Authorization forms. Transfer letters. And then the final one, a real estate application. I read it 3 times before the words made sense. They were trying to sell the house. My house. The one I had paid off 80% of. The one with my name on the deed. The one my father had signed over to me in a silent gesture of gratitude 2 years after his stroke, knowing I was the one keeping everything afloat. Ava and my mother had tried to list the property without telling me, using forged documents. I sat in the dark that night, the paperwork in my lap, and I realized I'd been living in a lie. They didn't love me. Not for me. They loved what I provided. What I enabled. I wasn't family. I was funding. And still, I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them the next morning over breakfast. I just smiled. Asked my mother if she wanted jasmine tea or chamomile. Told Ava her dress looked nice. nodded when my father asked me to adjust his wheelchair. But my silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was strategy. Because if they wanted a war, they had picked the wrong woman to underestimate. The next morning, I called Ms. Reynolds, my attorney. She'd helped me a few years back with a hostile corporate merger. She was discreet, fiercely intelligent, and most importantly, she never asked questions she didn't need answers to. I forwarded every document. Every forged signature. Every fake email account used to submit them. When she called me back, her voice was calm, but I could hear the steel behind it. They've committed fraud, Linda. Multiple counts. This isn't a family dispute anymore. It's criminal. I closed my eyes. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted peace. I wanted out. And I wanted to do it without them even realizing they'd been left behind. So we started making a plan. Quietly. Step 1, revoke access. The joint account I had set up for their household expenses? Closed. I opened a new one, connected only to a burner phone and an address they didn't have. My work income, my real money, was never going through those channels again. Step 2, gather proof. Ms. Reynolds had a private investigator confirm the bank's security footage from the day those forms were submitted. My mother had been there. So had Ava. And the notary public? An old acquaintance of my mother's from her charity days. We had it all documented, names, dates, signatures, even voice recordings of calls confirming the authorization. Step 3, prepare the exit. I started boxing up my things in the basement, slowly. One drawer at a time. One old blanket, one photo frame, one folder of work receipts per day. I took them to my office downtown, under the guise of decluttering. Nobody noticed. Or rather, they didn't care to look. Ava was planning her wedding with Tyler, her fiancé, who now came over every weekend and sat in the very living room I furnished, boasting about how they'd modernize everything once they got the deed finalized. Once, I passed him in the kitchen as he opened the new wine fridge I had installed 2 Christmases ago. "You'll like it better when Ava and I run the place," he said casually, not even looking at me. "We'll finally bring some life into this mausoleum." I said nothing. Just watched him pour my imported Bordeaux into a chipped mug like it was boxed wine. The next day, I visited the county records office and requested a full review of the deed status. Sure enough, the system had flagged a pending sale, but since I was still the primary title holder, it was paused for signature discrepancy. Ms. Reynolds filed a motion to freeze any transfer. That meant no one could touch the house legally without notifying me. I didn't tell them. I let them live in the fantasy a little longer. You see, when you're invisible long enough, people forget to watch you. But I was watching. Every word, every move, every whisper behind closed doors. And what I began to notice broke me more than any betrayal could have. They didn't just misuse me. They truly believed I owed them. One night, I overheard Ava whispering to Tyler on the front porch, wine glass in hand. "She'll cave," she said. "She always does. Linda wants to be needed. She doesn't know how to live without it." And Tyler, with that smug voice of his, replied, "Even if she finds out, we'll just guilt her. Mention Dad. Her eyes glaze over whenever you bring him up." Classic emotional chokehold. I nearly vomited. This wasn't just carelessness. This was manipulation. Calculation. And I had funded every minute of it. The next morning, I changed the locks. Quietly. I had the original keys reprogrammed and filed a change of access notice through my lawyer. No one knew because I let them keep using the same front door code. But I had an override. That weekend, I met with the bank manager personally. Ms. Reynolds accompanied me. We explained everything. Fraud, identity theft, forgery. By the time we left, the mortgage application had been permanently cancelled, and my mother and Ava were flagged in the system. They couldn't borrow a dime in my name again, even if they tried. I also made a final change to my estate plan. Once, everything had been willed to them. Now, it all went into a trust. One designed for women like me, financially exploited by their own families. It was poetic, in a way. They thought they were stealing my future. But I had already rewritten it. And then came the moment I knew would cut deepest. Ava's engagement party. I hadn't been invited. The venue was booked. The guest list was printed. And I only knew about it because I saw the caterer's invoice, charged to my name through a credit card they had stolen from my drawer 2 months ago. They didn't even bother hiding it. I canceled the card. Froze the transaction. And then, just because I could, I called the venue and requested a cancellation based on fraud. When Ava returned home that night, her smile was gone. "What happened to the booking?" she barked into her phone, pacing the kitchen. I sat in the corner, sipping tea. "I don't know," she snapped. "They said it was cancelled by the account holder." "But I didn't," she paused. Then slowly turned to look at me. I met her gaze. Calm. Steady. She opened her mouth, but I beat her to it. "You should really be more careful," I said. "Fraud has serious consequences." She blinked. Her face paled. And I stood, placing my cup gently in the sink, and walked out, leaving her standing there, the walls of her fantasy finally beginning to crumble. They weren't ready for what came next. But I was. The silence after that night was louder than anything that had come before. Ava stopped speaking to me entirely. No more fake smiles. No more "Hey, can you help me with this?" Not even a passive-aggressive comment at dinner. It was as if I had become a ghost again, but this time, it was intentional. This time, I wanted them to feel my absence, even while I was still sitting at the same table. And they did. I could see it in the way my mother glanced at me, hesitant, like I'd become someone she no longer understood. Or maybe never had. She still tried to ask polite questions, but they were coded in anxiety now. "How's work, dear? And you look tired, maybe you should take a vacation." The kind of small talk people make when they're trying to distract you from the knife they've buried in your back. I answered her with the same smile I used on boardroom executives right before cutting off funding. Cold. Polished. Unreadable. Tyler stopped coming around. After the venue cancellation, I heard him had second thoughts about marrying into a family with too much drama. Ava begged him to stay, according to a text I glimpsed when she left her phone unattended one evening. But something told me it wasn't about love. It was about losing the image she had so carefully crafted: perfect fiancé, perfect house, perfect life. Everything I paid for. They didn't know I had already filed for full asset protection. The house? Frozen. The car Ava drove? In my name, repossessed and sold within 2 weeks. The health insurance under my employer's plan? Revoked. I didn't owe them that anymore. I even redirected the utilities, the cable, the water bill, all to a new account. One they'd have to pay themselves. And that's when it started to hit them. They were living in a house they could no longer afford. Because the ATM had walked away. And not with a bang, but with perfect, legal silence. One morning, I came upstairs to find my mother standing at the kitchen sink, staring out the window with an empty mug in her hand. She didn't turn when I entered. "Linda," she said softly, "what are you doing to us?" I leaned against the doorway. "I'm doing what I should have done 10 years ago." She turned then, eyes hollow but still proud. "You're destroying this family." "No," I replied. "I'm just removing myself from the version of it that used me." She opened her mouth to argue, but the sound of the mailbox clattering outside interrupted us. She shuffled to the door. A few seconds later, she returned, holding a large white envelope. The return address was Ms. Reynolds' office. Her hands trembled as she opened it, pulling out a cleanly formatted letter. I watched her lips move as she read the contents. Slowly. Line by line. She looked up. "You're suing me?" "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself." "That document you tried to use to sell the house? The one with my forged signature? It's now part of an official fraud investigation." "But I'm your mother," she whispered, her voice cracking. "And I was your daughter," I said quietly, "but you didn't think twice about throwing me away when it was convenient." She sank into the nearest chair, stunned. It should have felt like a victory. It didn't. It just felt clean. Like brushing off years of dirt. Necessary, but not satisfying. Later that day, Ava finally broke her silence. She came to the basement, my basement, and stood in the doorway like a stranger. "How long have you been planning this?" I didn't look up from the box I was packing. "Since the day you called me your cousin." She winced. "I didn't mean that. I was just trying to protect your image? Make your boyfriend comfortable?" I stood now, facing her full on. "You looked me in the eye and erased me. You made me invisible. And I let you. That's on me. Linda, I was young. I didn't know." "Don't." My voice came out colder than I expected. "You knew. You just didn't care." She was crying now. Not loudly. Not the kind of sobs that seek sympathy. But the quiet, broken kind, where someone realizes they've lost something they didn't think could leave. "I just wanted to be loved," she whispered. "So did I said. There was nothing else to say." She left. And I returned to packing the last of my things. The following week, Ms. Reynolds filed the final paperwork. I transferred all assets, stocks, bonds, retirement accounts, into protected holdings. The house was officially pulled from market consideration. A notice was posted on the door the next morning, indicating it was under investigation for title fraud. I was already gone. I moved into a small apartment in Austin. It had creaky floors and no dishwasher. But it was mine. Every inch of it. No one else's name on the lease. No memories etched into the walls I didn't ask for. For the first time in years, I slept without waking up to someone else's needs. No alarms to give pills. No spreadsheets of expenses to calculate while everyone else went to brunch. No pretending. It wasn't glamorous. But it was free. A few weeks later, I received a letter. From the nursing home. My father had passed. I hadn't known he'd been moved there. No one told me. The funeral had already happened. Quietly. Without me. Ava sent a short message. "I'm sorry you weren't there. I thought maybe you didn't want to come." She was right. Because by then, the Linda they remembered, the one who gave without asking, was already gone. The death of my father should have wrecked me. But it didn't. Instead, it confirmed what I had suspected for years. I was no longer part of that family. Not really. Not in the way that counted. No one told me when he was admitted to a nursing home. No one thought to call when his health declined. And when he passed, I wasn't informed until he was already in the ground, just another signature Ava had been trusted to provide. The only feeling I had was a strange kind of numbness. Not coldness. Not even anger. Just a void, like my place in their world had been carefully erased, with a pen they assumed I'd never question. 2 days after the message from Ava, I received a certified letter from a real estate attorney representing my mother. It nearly made me laugh out loud. Inside was a single-page document, dated and stamped, attempting to authorize the transfer of the house title and one of my remaining joint investment accounts into Ava's name. My signature was at the bottom. Forged. Again. They hadn't learned. Or maybe they had, and just didn't care. I called Ms. Reynolds immediately. She didn't even blink. "They're desperate now," she said. "They know the wells run dry, so they're trying to squeeze out whatever they think they're still entitled to." "Is it enforceable?" "Not even close. The signature is all wrong. We'll file a preemptive injunction to prevent any movement." "But, Linda, this isn't over. They're going to keep trying." And they did. That month, I received 2 more notices. One from an insurance company attempting to confirm a beneficiary change. Another from the credit union requesting verification of a loan I never applied for. Both with my name. Neither initiated by me. It was like watching someone claw at the door of a house they no longer had the key to. And every time, I stood behind that door, calm, composed, and ready. Ms. Reynolds advised we formalize a case. Not just a fraud investigation, but a civil suit. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about creating a legal firewall so thick, they'd never be able to touch my assets, or my name, again. When the lawsuit was filed, it didn't go unnoticed. Within 48 hours, I got a knock on the door of my office. Ava. No appointment. No warning. She was clutching a stack of papers like a child caught sneaking candy. "You're suing Mom?" she asked, her voice cracking. She's not well, Linda. She might not make it through the winter." I closed the door behind her and motioned to the chair opposite my desk. She didn't sit. Instead, she slammed the papers down on the table, the same forged authorization forms I had received weeks ago. "Do you know how much this is tearing her apart?" I leaned forward, voice calm but ice-edged. "Do you know how much she tore me apart? Year after year? You stood there, Ava, while she signed my name and tried to steal everything I worked for. You watched her turn me into a bank account, not a person. And now you want sympathy? She's our mother." Ava shouted. "She raised us." "She raised you," I replied coldly. "She used me." Ava fell silent. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, softly, "I didn't think you'd find out." My heart twisted, not with sadness, but with the realization that she didn't even deny it. She just never thought I'd stand up. "I was afraid," she said. "Mom said if we didn't move fast, we'd lose everything. The house. The savings. Everything. And instead," I said, "you chose to betray the one person who kept it all afloat." Ava sank into the chair now, her shoulders folding in like a crumpled paper bag. "I thought you'd understand." "I do understand," I said. "That's the problem. I understand exactly how little I mattered to you. To her. To all of it." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry. But it was too late. I'm not doing this to punish you," I said. "I'm doing this to protect me. And from now on, that's the only person I'm responsible for." She left without another word. 3 days later, the news leaked. It wasn't intentional. But in a town like ours, where gossip moves faster than headlines, word spread that Linda Hayes, the quiet, brilliant CFO who never had a scandal, was suing her own family over forgery and financial theft. At first, I felt exposed. Like the whole world was watching. But then, something unexpected happened. I got messages. Emails. Notes. From strangers. From women I didn't even know. "Your story feels like mine. Thank you for standing up." I thought I was the only one. It turned out I wasn't alone. And that was the first time in years I realized that what had happened to me wasn't just personal. It was systemic. A silent epidemic of women, daughters, sisters, even mothers, used up and thrown away by the very people they sacrificed everything for. So I leaned in. I partnered with Ms. Reynolds to establish a new legal initiative, the Silent Pillar Fund. a support network and legal aid program for women who had financially supported their families only to be betrayed. We launched with a single article in a small business magazine. And that's when the storm came. Not against me, but against my mother. Donors pulled out of her charity events. Her name was removed from a community gala she had once hosted annually. People started asking questions about her, about the donations, about the house. She faded from public life. But I didn't gloat. I didn't cheer. Because it wasn't about revenge. It was about revelation. That's what I had chosen instead. And revelation, I've learned, can be more powerful than any vengeance. You'd think, after a public lawsuit, after the assets were locked, after the headlines and the quiet shunning by the community, that would be the end. But families like mine? They don't give up control easily. One morning, I received a call from the nursing home. My mother, Elaine Hayes, was in critical transition. Her health had deteriorated faster than expected, and she had one request. She wanted to see me. Not in her home. Not in mine. She asked to meet at my lawyer's office. She wants it to be official, the nurse said over the phone. She said she doesn't want to be misunderstood. It was the first time in my life my mother ever admitted she might need witnesses. I didn't sleep that night. Even with all the preparation, even knowing Ms. Reynolds would be there, and that every word would be documented and protected, I still felt like a child. Not the CFO. Not the woman who stood before executives and made 8-figure decisions. Just the daughter who'd spent a decade waiting for a single thank you. The next morning, I walked into the conference room early. Everything felt as it always had: clean wood panels, soft lighting, the faint hum of the city below. I set my bottle of water on the table, more to give my hands something to hold than out of thirst. 15 minutes later, they wheeled her in. Elaine Hayes. Thinner. Paler. Her hair fully gray, her wrist wrapped in gauze. She wore a soft pink shawl, the kind she'd always worn to charity events, like she wanted to remind everyone who she used to be. I didn't rise. I nodded politely. Ms. Reynolds took her place beside me, silent and ready. My mother's eyes flicked to mine. There was no warmth. But there was no fire either. Only fatigue. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I waited. "I know what I did," she continued, "and I won't waste this moment pretending I didn't." No one spoke. She took a breath. "I didn't come to beg forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve it." Still, I said nothing. "But I do want you to know. I see it now." I raised an eyebrow. "You were the one who never left. You carried us. Even when I never said thank you. Even when I made you feel invisible." Her voice cracked. "You deserved better." I kept my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "And if I could go back," she whispered, "maybe I'd hold you a little longer. Instead of holding everything else." My throat tightened. But I didn't cry. I wouldn't. "I'm not asking you to come back. I just wanted to say goodbye without lies." She turned to Ms. Reynolds then, and pulled a small envelope from her purse. "This is my last letter. No signatures. No documents. No tricks." She placed it on the table. "Linda," she said softly, "you were always the strong one. I just never understood that strength wasn't something to fear. It was something I should have honored." I finally looked at her, really looked. And I didn't see the mother I'd once begged to notice me. I saw a woman who had spent her whole life confusing control with love. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "But we are where we are because you couldn't say it sooner." She nodded. And that was it. She left without trying to hug me. Without drama. Just a final look. And that, somehow, hurt more than any fight we could have had. Later that night, I sat alone on my balcony, the sealed envelope untouched beside me. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Because closure, I realized, wasn't something anyone could hand me. It was something I had built brick by brick, like the foundation of a home I would never again let anyone sell out from under me. 2 months later, I got the call. She had passed. Peacefully, in her sleep, with only a nurse by her side. Ava arranged a private burial. No ceremony. No crowd. When the letter finally arrived from Ava a week later, she wrote, "I buried her quietly. No fake speeches. No forced forgiveness." Then at the bottom, "If you ever want to talk, I'm ready to listen now." I didn't reply right away. But I didn't throw it away either. Because this time, I had the choice. This time, I was the one holding the pen. The quiet after my mother's death wasn't just silence. It was space. A space I had never known existed. A space between responsibility and resentment, between obligation and identity. And for the first time in over a decade, I wasn't someone's daughter, someone's provider, someone's scapegoat. I was just Linda. I took time off work. A real break. No laptop in bed. No quick emails. I rented a small cabin outside of Austin for 2 weeks and brought nothing but books, journals, and silence. No one called me. Not Ava. Not old coworkers. Not anyone from the community I had left behind. It was perfect. Every morning, I brewed coffee and watched the mist drift over the trees. I didn't think about mortgages, lawsuits, or betrayal. I let myself grieve, but not for my mother. I grieved the version of myself I had lost trying to earn love from people who couldn't give it. I cried for her. The girl who worked double shifts to cover tuition. The woman who cooked dinner with a broken heart and still asked if anyone needed seconds. The person who let her own birthday pass unnoticed, year after year, thinking maybe she wasn't worth celebrating. She was gone. And in her place stood someone stronger, quieter, and far more dangerous. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I'd learned something my family never did. Silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes, it's strategy. When I returned to Austin, I reopened a project I had set aside for years, a financial literacy program for women navigating economic abuse. I'd always wanted to do it, but between work and family, there was never time. Now, there was. And within 3 months, I'd partnered with 2 nonprofits, recruited 6 volunteer mentors, and secured grant funding from a local women's fund. I called the program New Ground, because that's exactly what we were claiming. That's when the letters started coming in. Not from lawyers. But from women. Women who had seen the article in the business magazine about my lawsuit. Women who had followed the whispers. Women who had experienced the same betrayal in their own families and thought they were alone. I paid for my parents' house and now they've left it to my brother. My husband made me sign over everything to him. Said I didn't need ownership if I had love. My daughter drained my retirement account while I was in the hospital. And one that stopped me cold. I didn't know what to call it until I heard your story. Economic betrayal. That's what it is. Thank you for saying it out loud. I cried that night. Not from pain. But because I finally felt understood. Seen. Not just as a victim. But as a survivor. A few weeks later, Ava reached out again. Not by text. Not by email. A letter. Handwritten. It was short, barely a page. But honest. She wrote. I won't pretend to know what to say. I just want to try. If you ever feel ready, maybe we can meet. Just talk. Not about mom. Not about the past. Just 2 women. Trying. I folded the letter and left it on my desk. I didn't respond immediately. But the next weekend, I found myself walking past a small cafe in downtown Austin. The same cafe we used to visit as teenagers. Ava was sitting outside. Alone. She saw me. Stood up, hesitated. Then gave a tiny wave. I walked over. Not with open arms, but with an open door. We didn't hug. Didn't cry. Didn't even talk about the lawsuit, or the house, or the years of silence. We just talked. About now. About what it meant to be 30-something and feel like you were only just learning how to live. About guilt. About healing. And somewhere between the second coffee and the last bite of pie, she said it. I was jealous of you. I looked at her, startled. You were always so capable, she said. So composed. I hated you for it. But I also relied on it. And that wasn't fair. I said nothing. I'm not asking you to forget, she continued. Or to fix what's broken. I just want to know if we can start over. With truth. It wasn't an apology. It was something better. Accountability. And for the first time in years, I felt a door creak open inside me. Just a little. I nodded. We'll see. That night, I didn't write in my journal. I just stood on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker like stars that hadn't yet fallen. The Linda they used to know was gone. But the one I had become? She was just getting started. The first time I visited the cemetery, I came alone. It was a cloudy morning in early spring, the kind where the air smells like whetstone and beginnings. I brought no flowers. No notes. Just myself. My mother had been buried in a small, sparsely populated plot 20 miles outside of Houston. There was no headstone yet, just a wooden marker with her name, and a fresh patch of turned soil. No visitors. No trinkets. No lies. I stood there in silence, hands in my coat pockets. I didn't speak to her. I didn't cry. I just let the wind speak for both of us. And then, without thinking, I whispered something into the air. I still would have forgiven you. You just never gave me the truth soon enough. It didn't echo. It didn't need to. Forgiveness wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. And choosing to set down what she never had the courage to carry. A week later, I finalized the sale of the Houston house. The place I had once poured every dollar and breath into. I signed the final papers, returned the keys, and walked through it one last time. Room by room. The basement, still musty, still gray, was empty now. But I stood there for a moment, remembering the woman I used to be. Then I turned off the light. And left her behind. In the months that followed, new ground flourished. We expanded to 3 new cities. I gave talks, small ones at first, then bigger ones. And always, afterward, women came up to me, eyes shining, saying the same thing in 100 different ways. Thank you. I didn't think anyone would ever understand. I wasn't a hero. I was just a woman who had lived through something hard, something quietly violent, and decided to tell the truth about it. One night after a panel, an older woman came up to me. She wore a faded green coat and smelled faintly of peppermint. She took my hands in hers and said, I read about your story. My daughter, she did the same to me. Took everything. My house. My savings. I live in a trailer now. I didn't speak. I just held her hands tighter. But you know what, she said, with a teary smile. I'm freer than I ever was in that big house. No one takes from me anymore. Not even my hope. We hugged then. A real hug. The kind that feels like 2 broken pieces clicking together, even for just a moment. Later that night, I sat on my balcony, a glass of wine in hand, staring at the city. I thought about my father. The quiet man who taught me chess and how to balance a checkbook. I thought about my mother, the woman who confused control with care, love with leverage. And I thought about Ava. We still talked. Not often. Not about everything. But we met once a month now, for coffee or tea. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we just sat. The thing is, rebuilding doesn't always look like a grand gesture. Sometimes it's just consistency. Showing up. Not pretending. Letting the cracks stay visible. One day, she brought me a gift. A small box wrapped in brown paper. Inside was the painting my mother had made the day I graduated college. A soft, abstract piece with warm tones, sunlight over water, done in oils. I'd forgotten it existed. She kept it in the closet, Ava said. I found it after she died. I think she meant to give it to you, but never did. I didn't hang it in the living room. That felt too final. But I placed it on a shelf in my office. Not as tribute. But as proof. Proof that even the things we never received can still exist. That love, even if twisted, might still try to find its way. And even if it's too late to fix it, it's not too late to make peace with it. That year, on my birthday, I did something I hadn't done in a decade. I baked myself a cake. Not a slice. Not a store-bought cupcake with one candle. A full cake. Dark chocolate, with raspberry layers and buttercream frosting. I invited 3 new friends, women I met through new ground. We ate, drank wine, and sat on the floor, barefoot, telling stories about who we used to be. No one mentioned work. Or money. Or loss. Just dreams. And tiny, silly joys. That night, as I washed the dishes, I caught a glimpse of myself in the window reflection, smiling. No makeup. No mask. Just Linda. Alive. Free. And quietly powerful. In the end, I didn't get revenge. Not in the way most people imagine it. I didn't humiliate them. I didn't destroy them. I simply removed my hand from the foundation. And watched what happened when they realized they had built nothing without me. Some may say that's not justice. But to me, that's the most powerful justice there is. Because I didn't need to burn the house down. I just walked away. And built something better. If you've ever carried a family, only to be left empty, this story is for you. If you've ever been betrayed, manipulated, or used, and stayed quiet because they're family, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You are not alone. You are not weak for walking away. You are strong for surviving. You are powerful for healing. And you deserve a life that isn't built on debt and silence. Let that be your legacy.